Hey everyone, my name is Larissa, and today we will be reviewing AICE International History Chapter 1.3. Let's get right into it. 1.3 is about why did Japan emerge as a world power and what was the impact on international relations. So first let's discuss reasons for rapid modernization and military development. Japan's rise as an imperial power in its own right was both sudden and dramatic. In the first half of the 19th century, Japan was still an unmodernized country with an almost medieval social structure. Farming, transport, and industry had changed little for centuries. Fearing the disruptive impact of Christian missionaries, Japan had effectively closed its borders to all foreigners in the 17th century. The USA in particular was desperate to gain trading rights. In 1853 to 1854, the USA sent a fleet under Comrade Perry. When the Japanese refused to agree to USA demands, Perry threatened large-scale violence. Samurai swords were no match for modern guns. And the Japanese had no alternative but to open their borders. In 1854, Japan signed a treaty allowing the USA trading access to 2 ports. This situation posed an enormous risk to Japan. With military backing, foreign merchants had already seized control of large areas of China. There was an obvious risk that Japan would face the same fate. To avoid this, in 1867, the Japanese people demanded the restoration of an emperor as head of the government instead of the military shogun. Following the Meiji Restoration the following year, Emperor Meiji and his government set about modernizing Japan. By 1869, they had established a centralized administration. A new constitution was created based on the German model. Japan revised it and would need to adopt Western ways in order to retain its independence. The Japanese modeled their education system, form of government, army, navy, and industry on those of foreign nations whose presence they most feared. Mines, iron, foundries, factories, and shipyards were quickly developed. Railways and telegraph lines were laid. 1/3 of the national budget was spent on the army and navy. Military service became compulsory for all adult males. By 1894, Japan possessed 28 modern warships. In schools, children were taught to be patriotic and to show total obedience to the emperor. The main reason for Japan's imperial ambitions was economic. As a relatively small island nation, Japan possessed limited natural resources. Much like the European imperial powers, the Japanese began to seek overseas possessions in order to gain the resources they lacked. Disputes over Korea led to the First Sino-Japanese War in 1894. The new modern Japanese army quickly overran Korea, Manchuria, and parts of China itself. Under the Treaty of Shimonoseki in 1895, China was forced to make territorial concessions to Japan, including the strategically important Port Arthur. Japan's speedy victory came as a shock to the major European powers. Russia greatly resented Japanese control over Port Arthur. With the support of France and Germany, Russia imposed diplomatic pressures on Japan to relinquish Port Arthur. Faced with this triple intervention, Japan had little choice but to back down. Humiliated, the Japanese decided to build more warships and wait for the opportunity to gain revenge against the Russians. Now let's talk about international recognition of Japan as a world power. So this involved Russian expansion in the Far East, the Anglo-Japanese alliance of 1902, and the Russo-Japanese War of 1904 through 1905. On February 9, 1904, Japanese warships entered Port Arthur, where Russian ships were totally unprepared for battle. This began the Russo-Japanese War of 1904 to 1905. Japan quickly established control over the local seas. After a 3-month siege, Mukden fell to the Japanese. Russia's last hope lay with the Baltic Fleet. Out of the slow-moving and outdated Russian vessels were no match for Japan's modern warships under Admiral Togo Hidechiro. By the following day, Japan had defeated the Russian Navy. The Treaty of Portsmouth recognized Japan's overwhelming victory. Russian influence in Manchuria was ended, and Japan's rights over Korea were formally recognized. Honoring its alliance with Britain, Japan entered the First World War by declaring war on Germany in 1914. While the Western powers were fully occupied in Europe, Japan took advantage of their absence. Japan began to supply the Far East with goods that European countries could no longer provide. During the war years, Japan's exports of cotton cloth increased threefold. The Japanese merchant fleet almost doubled in size. Japan attacked German-controlled regions of China's Shantung province, enabling it to extend its own interests. In January 1915, Japan presented China with 21 demands, designed to dramatically increase Japanese political and economic power over much of China. When the Chinese initially refused, Japan issued an ultimatum on May 7, 1915, declaring that if no satisfactory reply was received, the imperial government would take steps that they deemed necessary. Following this ultimatum, the Chinese finally agreed. Under pressure from the USA and Britain, Japan was eventually forced to reduce its demands, but even the revised demands granted Japan similar rights in China to those enjoyed by the other great powers. Overall, Japan's role in the First World War was crucial. Overall, Japan's role in the First World War was crucial. It allowed Japan, in a period of less than 50 years, to develop into a modern industrial country with the military capacity to defeat a major European power. By 1918, Japan had unquestionably emerged as a world power. Thank you for watching. This concludes our summary of Chapter 1.3 for AICE International History. I wish you the best of luck with your studies. Bye-bye.